Hello beautiful friends! This topic has been a highly requested one for a while, so I'm really excited to sit down and make this video for everyone. If you're new to my channel, I have been traveling and living out of my suitcase for over a decade. And in that time, I like to think that I have acquired at least a few tips and tricks of traveling alone, especially as a female solo traveler, as I'd say about 98% of my travels have been solo by myself. And before I get into it, I do just want to say I really don't want these experiences to scare you away from traveling. Unfortunate things can happen anywhere you are, so I really don't want these tips or experiences to deter you at all from wanting to travel. For the amount that I've traveled, I can say that I've been really blessed and very fortunate to not have many bad things happen to me or difficult things while traveling. There has definitely been a lot of little things and a few things that I'll talk about, but keep in mind that I have traveled for 12 years straight by myself. I've taken maybe a few months in one spot at the most. There's really not that much to be scared of. Of course, you have to do your research on which countries are safe at the given time. And that brings me to my first point. Do your research. Obviously, you should know where you're traveling to. And I've heard of a lot of different situations where people just show up in a foreign country and they don't even know the local religion or the local laws. So an example of this is I was in the Maldives and I was speaking to a man who worked at the hotel I was at, and he manages other resorts. And he said very often people from other countries would come, tourists, and be really angry when they get to their resort because that particular resort you're not allowed to wear a bikini because the Maldives is Muslim. And many people don't even research that. He says it happens all of the time. You just see a beautiful destination and decide not to research the local customs, which really isn't smart. You have to know what's appropriate and what's not, because not only is it disrespectful, but it's also unsafe for you because you don't want to be drawing that kind of attention to yourself. One of the first times I ever went to a Muslim country was Malaysia, and the area I was in was pretty strict. And I was in a kayak and I had a full cover on my top, but I had taken my pants off, so I just had a bikini bottom. And I was with other local kayakers and they told me that they would go run and get me a towel and swim it back to me so I didn't have to walk along the beach in just bikini bottoms. And I said, no, it's fine, don't worry, it's not a big deal to me. And it was horrible. So coming from Canada, we're very open. We have nude beaches. I'm used to just being open with my body. And honestly, I felt like I had just done something so disrespectful to the locals because as I walked along the beach, there was actually people covering their children's eyes and looking so shocked and really appalled by my actions. And after that, I realized that I really need to respect local customs, and what might not be a big deal to me at all could really be seen as rude to others from other cultures. So really just doing your research, obviously doing your research if the place is safe. There's always government websites that will tell you when a place is unsafe to go to or if there's particular neighborhoods to stay away from. This is very important. I really can't stress it enough. Even times I've talked to people who have said a country is super safe. I've done my research, read some forums, and it definitely wasn't safe to go to, especially by myself. Know the local laws, know the local customs, know the neighborhoods, know the public transit, know if there's certain transit to stay away from, know the taxis, know if they're safe, know the companies of different taxis, the ones that are well known, and just read up on the place. Know where you're going to, not only for your safety, but so you can have the full experience of this new culture and country. The second thing I want to say is to always be aware of your surroundings. So don't be too paranoid. I can say that over the years I've become a little bit paranoid, but I think it's for my own good. One experience that I'll share with you that actually happened in Australia, where I'm making this video right now. So like I said, situations can happen anywhere. You know, you hear about this and you think it might have been in a third world country or an undeveloped area, but it happened right in Sydney, Australia. So wherever you are, even back home in Canada, I'm always aware, especially if it's nighttime or certain neighborhoods. So these really apply to anywhere in the world. This happened when I was about 22 or 23, so I was a bit of a party girl when I was younger, and I was catching a taxi at about 5 in the morning. I was gonna switch hotels. I was drunk, so I got into the taxi, and this taxi driver kept asking me all these questions, and he was from a different country. I'm not gonna say where, but he was asking me, are you traveling alone? Are you in Australia alone? Do you have any friends here? Things like that, that normally I would have not even answered, but because I had some drinks in me, I just was in the mood of talking and socializing, so I answered his questions. Then I was on the phone overseas back home talking to a friend of mine, and at the same time in my mind, I kind of was thinking that was a weird conversation. Those were not normal questions. So as my friend was talking to me on the phone, I started listening to the man over his headpiece, and I heard him quietly say some things in a different language, and then Canadian and female. So I kind of knew something was off then, and I actually hung up the phone but pretended to keep talking to my friend on it. And then I checked the phone to look at the maps, and we were about half an hour away from the direction we were supposed to be going in. So we were already in a completely opposite suburb of Sydney, and where it was going, it looked like it was just going into the bush somewhere. So right away I started to panic, and I sternly told him, pull over the vehicle, you're not bringing me to my destination, and I'll call the police. And he just said, oh no, this is a shortcut, don't worry, it's just a shortcut. And the doors were locked. So I started banging on them and hitting the window and freaking out. And once he saw that, he pulled over. And when I got out of the vehicle, he drove off with my suitcase in the back of the car. And this had all happened so quickly that I didn't get the taxi driver number, but it was a big company in Australia. So I called them, and they were not helpful at all. They basically told me if I didn't have the number, there's absolutely nothing they can do for me. So this was actually probably one of the most scary things that have ever happened to me in my life. This doesn't happen often, but it can happen anywhere you are. Like I said, this could even happen back home in Canada. I've heard a lot of stories. So anywhere you are, just remain aware. And in most countries, I don't drink alcohol, but Australia is kind of like my second home. So I let loose a little bit more here, or at least I used to when I was younger. But I honestly wouldn't recommend taking any substances in other countries. Other than Australia, when I used to work in nightclubs, I really don't drink or do anything else in a different country unless I'm in a very contained environment where I know I'm going to be safe during that time, and I'm not going to be walking around the streets or catching taxis by myself. And not only for safety, there's a lot of undercovers when you go out and party in other countries. So I've met a lot of people who have tried to buy drugs off of an undercover cop, and then they end up in a foreign country, which is not fun, or they end up having their bank accounts emptied out by that cop. They'll take you to an ATM and make you empty out all your accounts and give them the cash. I can say that it's really never a smart idea to get extremely intoxicated. I know it's tempting when you're on vacation, but especially when you're by yourself, I definitely wouldn't recommend it. Another top tip that I definitely have that I have really learned over the years is to honor your intuition. Really, your intuition knows best, and we so often ignore it because it doesn't make logical sense to us a lot of the time. But if you're in a situation where something feels off or you don't feel safe, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's rude just to walk away, honestly, just walk away. I was just in India by myself, and there was some situations there where like the men are always around me there, especially when I'm walking on the street. And there was a few situations where I didn't feel safe, or I went into a store and I didn't feel safe. And honestly, I just ran away from some of these people because they wouldn't leave me alone. And Sure, I might have felt silly, but I would rather be silly than something happen to me. In these situations, you really have to sit and listen to your gut, and if it's saying to leave, just leave. Don't give an explanation, just go. A good idea if you are in a poorer country, an undeveloped area, I would recommend carrying a fake wallet with you. You can have 2 wallets on you. Have your real wallet hidden somewhere, and then have a fake wallet with not very much in it, maybe like $40 US or something. If you get bothered by police officers or whatever situation you end up in, you can say, this is all I have on me, just take this, and they'll take it. For example, I like to have a scooter, and technically it's not legal in some countries, but everyone does it. Sometimes police will stop you basically just looking for money. So if you pull out a wallet with a few hundred in it, they'll take all of that. So just have a little amount. If you only have $20, they'll probably be happy with that and then let you go. I would recommend, though, getting an international license, especially a bike license. I'm not saying that I always make the safest decisions, but I'm just sharing what works for me and what I would recommend to you. Also keep a copy of your passport and visa, if you have a visa, in your iCloud storage. So if you lose your laptop or your phone or anything, you still have it stored somewhere. Obviously, if you lose your passport, I have been really lucky to never lose my passport, but if it happens, it's a pretty big headache and you won't be able to leave the country until you get that sorted out. So have a copy of it. It will help you a lot if you ever end up in that situation. This tip is for people who are active on social media, like myself, especially if you are a solo female traveler. Don't check into places while you are in them. So if you follow my Instagram, I am usually constantly checking into places, but I'm actually posting that once I left the place. I actually made the mistake recently of posting a video in real time of my balcony, and someone actually showed up at the hotel looking for me. Even if you don't have a big following, it shows up on the story of that area, and someone can see from your post that you're traveling by yourself, and it's just not a smart idea. So save the post to your phone and then just post them as you're leaving the place or afterwards. Try to be unforgettable. So in the West, in common society, I think we're always trying to stand out, and a lot of us want attention, but when we're traveling alone, it's a safer option to try to blend in with the locals as much as possible. And even if you can't, try to look like you don't have money. Try to look like you're a broke backpacker. When I learned this and went from really being kind of dressed up to not wearing makeup and wearing like hippie clothing, the difference was crazy, and I felt so much safer when I wasn't being more noticeable. Even if I'm living in a van or a car, which I do sometimes, and I have my valuables in it, my camera, my laptop, my equipment, I try to make the vehicle look as cheap as possible. So sometimes I'll even leave like empty food containers in the front seats just so it looks like someone who doesn't really take care of themselves lives in that. I mean, people aren't really gonna think that there's valuables in a vehicle like that. A few little tips. Take the card of your hotel room with you in case your phone dies. So always have directions, like in a map or something, so that someone who doesn't speak your language will be able to understand where you have to go. I've ended up in some really sticky situations when I first started traveling, not planning ahead for this. Taxis, honestly, can be dangerous situations. So sometimes if I feel like it's a bit sketchy, I'll take a picture of the license plate before I get in and make sure that the driver saw me do that. And then when I get in, I'm usually on my phone. And I always try to sit directly behind the driver as well. And I try to be on my phone, even if my phone doesn't have a local SIM yet, which, by the way, is another good tip. Invest in a local SIM, very important. It's worth the investment, it's for your safety. So even if you don't have one yet, just pretend to be on your phone so they think that you're in contact with someone who knows where you are. Talk to strangers, don't be scared of locals. For the most part, they usually want to help and they're usually really excited to share with you information about where they're from. Just don't go anywhere with them. If you need directions, just have them point you in the direction rather than following them somewhere, because they could take you in an alley or who knows what. So talk to strangers, just don't go anywhere with them. Try to have a small backpack that has hidden zippers instead of having a purse. In some countries, I've heard of people driving by on motorbikes and taking the purse, but because you're holding onto it, they'll drag you along. I mean, it's not happening all the time, but I've heard a few times this happening, and I would just recommend you'll see people with small backpacks in the front of them, depending where you are. If it's an area that's really known for that, again, you can look online beforehand and see if theft is really popular in that area. Then just prepare beforehand to have something that can't be easily taken off of you or pickpocketed. Again, I'd say don't go out at night, depending where you are. As a solo female traveler, I honestly try to avoid going out at night unless I'm with friends and we're going somewhere. If I'm alone, I'm usually at my hotel at nighttime. I just don't think it's worth taking the risk. Something my brother taught me when I was younger, and I was hanging out in a suburb of the area I grew up in, which is known for crime. And my brother told me to walk like I know where I'm going. And this has always stuck with me because I think it's really good advice. If you're somewhere unfamiliar and you're looking around nervously or unconfidently, you're gonna stick out and potentially be a target. But if you're walking around with your head up, straight in a direction, like you know where you're going, you're less likely to be bothered because you look like you're a local, or you are at least familiar with the area. I honestly always have pepper spray or a knife with me. I have only had to use both of them one time, but I'm not gonna share that story on this video. Maybe I'll make a separate video about that. I did actually just get my pepper spray taken away at customs in Australia. I was silly and didn't do my research, and I did travel through Australia with pepper spray before, but apparently it's illegal. They've checked my luggage in the past and didn't tell me that, so I don't know if it's a new law. But anyways, I got a warning for that. Australia is pretty safe, so I don't think I need it, but I just like to have that if in some situation I'm walking alone at night. It's good to have some kind of protection. I think that's pretty much it for now that I can think of. If any of you have questions whatsoever, just comment below and I will do my best to answer. Again, I just want to say these are just meant to help you along your journey, not to scare you away from it. Things happen everywhere. Be aware, be smart, and definitely do your research. I love you all. Thank you for tuning in. For more videos like this, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.